What's up, everybody? I'm Lauryn Friar with True Star Media, and today we are here with the MindSite News investigative reporter, Josh McGhee, for another segment of Sesh with the Pros. Mr. McGhee, thank you for taking out the time to talk to us today.
Thank you for having me.
So our first question is, what high school and what college did you attend?
I went to Providence Catholic High School in New Lenox. I played basketball there. I got a basketball scholarship to go to Culver Stockton College. It's a small NAIA school in northeastern Missouri, Canton, Missouri. They were famous for having the longest losing streak in football for a while. But it was just across the Mississippi, but it was very far from the Chicagoland area, especially in culture and other things.
All right, so in college, what did you major in?
I was a communications major. I really didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I heard that a lot of athletes became communications major. Basically, I walked in to college with that I thought I had a good voice and maybe I could do radio, but I was really not sure if I would do PR, if I would do storytelling. It was all kind of a blend of things. So, it was really, I had the opportunity to be there. Once I was in there, you basically had to do some kind of electives where I ended up at a radio station, but I also ended up as an editor of the newspaper, basically because they said they would pay me money. And I was like, I need money for food, so please give it to me. So I kind of took that and I fell in. I loved it. I was a editorial and an opinion editor because no one else wanted the job. And I just got to write whatever I wanted basically about college. And, it was an interesting experience. I was in a different place with different people. And, I kind of used a little bit of humor to kind of write my columns. But, it was really a growing experience, just kind of having a job and then actually falling in love with the product and trying to make it better and then trying to improve yourself so that you can make it better.
Oh, that's nice. So would you say that your communications degree, that's what led you into journalism?
Yeah, I think that a lot of communications is part of journalism, but it isn't necessarily what journalism is. Just kind of the path that I was there on. I met a teacher who really wanted me to be involved, so he kind of pushed me down into some of the journalism lanes. But basically it opened up a very wide tunnel is what communications did. And then it was like, okay, where else can you go? What do you want to do? I did internships in TV. I did internships in radio stations. I did an internship at the Chicago Sun-Times. I did some freelance work for a small newspaper out there. So I really didn't know exactly how I wanted to do this. And I don't think I still know how exactly I want to do this for the long run. But just kind of being in that space gave me some time to spread the wings and see what I did like, what I didn't like.
Okay, so with those internships, it sounds like you did a lot.
I did a lot of internships.
How did you get into doing the internships and doing the freelance? Like, what advice would you give to somebody that's maybe trying to get into some internships or some programs?
The first thing is there's resources for you, especially if you're at a school, a college. There's ways to kind of manipulate a budget so that you can find a way and don't do unpaid internships. Don't like them at all. I didn't do a single one. But there's kind of these ways. So my school had what was like experiential learning, which is like 3 weeks where you, instead of like having a class for 3 weeks, you have an opportunity to do something different and kind of explore your learning in a different way. Some people would take that and they would go to like Bali or to another country for like a real exploratory thing. And I was like, I don't want to do any of that stuff. I don't want to fly with you guys. So I used that money to pay so that the school could pay the place to pay me for my internships. The other thing is meet people, like shake hands, network. It can be expensive to go to like conferences and things, but journalists around you and around here, their email boxes, there's tons of, they will always respond to youth who want to figure out something about the business, who want to figure out a way to get an internship. And also once you make that connection, people will look out for you. Have a phone call, have some coffee, 15 minutes of just kind of talking with this person will make that connection where they like you, you feel like you're trying to do the right thing or want to really get into this. they will usually kind of look around for more spots and other internships for you. How old are you? Do
17.
you mind me asking?
Oh, that's fine. 17.
17. Okay, so yes, like as soon as the time for internships comes, like there's gonna be lots of different kind of ways to get in there, but the best way is always to network. Most of the internships I had was not because, well, one at the Chicago Sun-Times was because I met a reporter at the Chicago Sun-Times at my school and I bugged the stuff out of him. I don't know if I can cuss on here. I bugged the stuff out of him and he basically was like, well, send me your resume. In college, the only thing you're doing is making sure your resume is perfect for this right opportunity. So I went back to my room and 10 minutes later, I sent him my resume. I do the same thing at conferences now. It sounds crazy, but if you talk to people who are managing people, not being thirsty does not get you the job. So being a little thirsty always kind of helps. But I met some people at the NABJ conference last week. I shook their hands, they gave me their card. I went back to the room, sent what I told them I was going to send, if it was a resume, if it was some clips from some stories. And, I'm not expecting to like try to get a new job or do anything, but just to like, make these connections and have these friends for the future. So when they do see your work, they retweet it. They're like, oh, this guy is doing good. Or this guy, what is his problem? He doesn't know what he's doing. But just kind of making those connections and keeping them. I think with social media, it's a little bit easier now. You can follow somebody so you know what they're tweeting, what they're talking about, but also they're going to see you kind of in their circle more. They're going to see what you're thinking, what you're writing, what you're working on. So just kind of using some different ways to network and just making sure you shake hands and use hand sanitizer after.
Okay, so something you mentioned was being thirsty. So I got from that like a characteristic would be being very driven. If you're wanting to be a reporter or get into journalism, what would you say are some other characteristics that makes a good investigative reporter?
Aggressive is one of those things, but also I think the first one is really kind of empathetic. You can't really do any of these stories, whether it's investigative or daily beat reporting, in the right way for the long term, if you don't have the empathy to talk to these people about what's going on, what's happening, so you can understand a problem. I know a lot of times when I'm doing interviews for investigative journalism, I'm talking to some very higher up people who kind of see the system from like 600 feet or above, or whatever the cliche is. But they don't usually have the same empathy as someone who's like, well, I live on this block, or I've seen this, or I've seen this violence, or I've seen kind of how this hurts. And you don't experience all of these things yourself, but being able to get inside these people's homes, to talk to them about what the real trauma and harm is really key to driving your kind of investigative reporting. You have to have a reason for exploring this, because the work isn't easy. But also, there isn't really a cutting corners kind of idea. Investigative reporting is like, I'm gonna work for 8 hours and I might not write a single word. Like I might have read 200 pages and jotted down some notes, and that was my day. But I still have to figure out how to get the report done on deadline. So one of the things is kind of being organized. I use a lot of tools. Hopefully, some of them are free. Airtable, I don't pay for at the moment, but to kind of organize your thoughts, your writing, and have a plan. The first 1 through 5 stories you're going to do for investigative reporting, you're going to be haphazard. You're going to be going all over the place. You're going to be thinking, I need this, I need that. And your editor is going to say, can you just write me a story? So like having kind of a process that you can use over and over again is really key in kind of organizing your data, organizing your public records, organizing your interviews. Is really going to be key, so that you can, at the end of the day, remember everything you have. And if you can't remember exactly where it is, you can find it through your organizational system. I think that's one of the biggest things. But you can't also, like at the time of now, you can't like just bury yourself in documents and read research studies. You really have to kind of start reading and say, oh, well, if this is a point that I need to make, let me write it down. Here's a person I should call, and send out that email, send out the interview request kind of early, so that you can interview a lot of people. Because when I was first doing daily writing, I could write a story and talk to 2 people, and that would be enough. But like, you will get the wrong idea if you try to do that for an investigative story. You need to talk to every single person, kind of turn over a lot of rocks, and then know when it's time to write. But, if you're getting one-sided answers on a whole bunch of stuff, you need to expand your network and see what the actual problem is or what the actual good parts are about the system, because nothing's perfect.
Okay, thank you. That was a lot. That was very helpful.
Okay.
So something that you said that really stuck out to me was that one of the characteristics is being empathetic. What would you say is the most challenging story that you've had to cover so far?
Ooh, I want to say there's some challenging stories, but I think the big thing would be what was called the human toll.
Mhm.
It was a project we worked on at DNA Info that basically we tried to cover every homicide in Chicago
Oh,
and talk to the families of the person shot and kind of give an empathetic feel, I think, to the story. But I did that for like a year and a half. And, at some point it was very traumatizing. There was times that I would like cry in my car and then wipe off the tears and just kind of go into the house, talk to the people and do the interview. But, a lot of the times, like you could feel kind of the emotion and the need to kind of talk about the situation to someone who was listening. Sometimes those interviews were 2.5, 3 hours, and I'm only going to use half of this tape or like 3, 4 minutes, to be honest. But I think one of the biggest ones was LA Capone. He was a rapper who died kind of early in life. It was out in South Shore, I believe. Like, I think he was going to the studio or from the studio. But basically, like a lot of times these stories, you drive around, you knock on doors and you won't get anybody. But I knocked on the right door and I got his mother. His mother was there. And he had just had a birthday, I believe. So there was like a birthday cake on the table, and it was just kind of, you see this moment, this real life moment, especially for talk to a lot of Black mothers who've lost their child. And it's like there's this whole hole that's like drained out of someone being in the house, seeing the cake. And I think at the end of the interview, she threw the cake out, and it was just like this. It was a clicker, but it was a moment. She's looking around the house. She sees all the snacks she buys for her son. The cereals, the sugary cereals that she probably shouldn't buy, but she buys because her kid loves it. And who doesn't want to see the kid smile for a couple minutes? Life is hard. I got a whole bunch of ice cream in the fridge just in case we all have a bad day. It's one of those things you can kind of um erase the pain or go through the pain together with the trauma together with, and just kind of have a moment. But that was it was one of those stories where it was very hard to write, but it was important to write. And I feel like it really stuck with me because a lot of the stories are, okay, this person's a gang member, and then it's like, oh, the mom says they're not a gang member, and then it's kind of a back and forth you'll see in comments about things, and it's like none of that really matters at the heart of the thing. Even the way that police categorize gangs is wrong. It's not anything that actually means they're in a gang. It's your cousin was in a gang, or you live in the vicinity of something that's gang. Like, that's Chicago, that's the South Side, that's the West Side. It could be any of us. But just this story was like, I didn't even need to worry about this. It was a guy who rapped about some things that probably were a little bit violent, and people would probably casually throw this away as just another one. But talking to the mom and feeling this impact, which is like, the violence doesn't just stop at some person being shot. It's a whole thing. And that kind of made me want to dig into criminal justice in a different way. I was doing these stories and I was good at them, but I didn't want to do that forever. I didn't want to have to tell the stories of trauma like this forever, though most of the stories still end up going into something a little bit traumatic. But, that was a moment where I was like, okay, this is a huge hole. This is not just one person, not one mom. These are all the moms. These are all the moms in this community. These are all the people in the community. I think I did one story about a shooting death in the neighborhood, and basically, like, I knocked on one door and the lady had a 6-year-old son, and she was just like, well, tell him what happened to Johnny. And I'm like, why do you want me to do this? But I was just like, it's a fear in your head. All of this stuff kind of comes around, and it's not like a specific thing. It's just more like, this is the landscape and of the trauma. It affects the whole community. It affects all Chicago, not just the places where it happened.
So how did you bear the weight of um, telling those stories? I'm sure like that was a lot of pressure and it was very overwhelming, as you said. What did you do to kind of calm down all the noise? Like, what did you do to unwind when it got very overwhelming?
Well, the best thing I did was use classical music when I was writing. Other than that, it was a traumatic time. It was a lot of mental health stuff that I kind of buried inside myself too, that I still kind of do now. But now I have insurance and stuff, so I go to therapy and talk to specialists about things. But this is a job where it can get intense, and if you don't find healthy ways to cope, you will be buried in something that's harmful. I think remembering why I was doing it, which was really the key, is like I feel for these families. My family's from not my grandmother
Mhm.
and my cousins lived in Inglewood for their whole childhood, going up to probably about 25. Like there's people who survived and there's people on that block who didn't survive. And it was always a fear of maybe this could happen to someone in my family. Maybe this could happen to one of my cousins. Maybe it would happen to someone I know. And some of those trickled in, but praise God that it was never that close. But it's one of those things where if you want to tell these stories, you got to be focused on your rationale and reasoning why. These are not small scenarios. They're huge, especially if you're from these communities. So um, I think one of the best things was probably I was definitely at some point I told my boss, I don't want to do these stories anymore. I want to do something different. And I got a new beat, and it was a little bit helpful. But towards the end, I would get calls, I would get emails from people, from families who basically had just lost a child. And it was, we don't want to see the Chicago Tribune article on our kid, and it just not getting to us and what it means. They wanted something more empathetic, and they were like, come here, come talk to us. And I think it was like a Friday at like 8 o'clock, just the time when you don't really want to do your job, but like being in the house, feeling kind of the therapeutic go through of the feelings of the family, to hear their stories, to remember their person. And in this way, it was just like, okay, well, you are doing something. You could be doing a lot of different jobs. You could work for Amazon, you could do, I don't know, you could be a teacher. There's reasons and rationales to do all of these things. But like, I enjoy storytelling, so I felt that I was doing a service to the Black community of Chicago, Black and Brown community of Chicago. But by doing these, I think about kind of when we have an unexpected death in the family, and it's like sometimes people are scrambling for someone to put together a coherent obituary and story of life. And it's like, well, you can help people do this. You can help them sort through these stories. I don't care if they use the article for obituary or if they use the cutout or the quotes for anything. But it's like, it's a service, because we know we want our family to be remembered, our people to be remembered for more than whatever the police said happened, because we know that can't be trusted all the time.
That's definitely true. Okay, so we've talked about the most challenging stories and everything, but what would you say your favorite story to cover? What's been your favorite story? Maybe the most heartwarming, something that was just really close to you.
I mean, I think it's always kind of the smaller ones. It's the ones that you're never gonna kind of remember exactly why and where you were there. I think one I just had, like, I got to hang out with kids who were like building or fixing a garden. I think it was up in Uptown somewhere, where they were fixing a garden, and some little kid was just playing with worms. And it was like, this is the great job. This is why this job is great. I'm hanging out with a kid playing with worms, gonna have to write 500 words about this, but like, it was more fun to just kind of be there and do it. And I think those stories were kind of like the niche of DNA Info, Black Club Chicago now, just kind of being there with people in the neighborhood, not trying to, rile everybody up and all this other stuff. But I also think of when I was covering Uptown, there was like there's a big unhoused population that was basically getting pushed around the neighborhood. And I would hear some awful things from some of the neighbors about how these people can't be there. But I would go down to the viaducts and I would talk to them. I would talk to these people. Some of them had deep issues. Some of them were just gay and they couldn't be in their house with their families. So now they're out on the streets all of a sudden. It was some of those kind of weird interactions where you don't really know everything about this population unless you go talk to them. But basically, I was tired of writing story after story about someone being pushed around or them not being allowed to be here. They were pushed off like a school lot that was being sold to like some investors. But at the end, it got to probably like the Christmas time area, and I was just like, these people are outside. It's gonna snow. It's gonna get cold. What's gonna happen? You know. And I found probably I think a 78-year-old man who was just talking about like he doesn't have anywhere to go. There's no other options. And I went to the shelters and I was like, is there no options? And they're like, they can come here, but they're not going to have space for the long term. They're going to have to drop some of their stuff off. They're not going to be able to keep all of their things. And you kind of saw how being unhoused becomes a recurring cycle that you can't really get out of. They definitely threw some pilot programs in to try to help them, but people didn't want to get relocated. But basically, like, I think it was the day before Christmas, the Reven David Logan Foundation, they like saved this shelter that was closing, and it was going to be, I think it was 75 beds. I'm pretty sure. I'm not exactly sure on the numbers, so please don't quote me on that. But it was going to close. Like I witnessed them. They moved the washer and dryers into moving trucks. They took the beds out. It was over for them and their staff. And basically, like on the last day, they came in with a big donation and they saved the place. So it was kind of like this. I don't know, it was this moment where I was like, dang, all hope is lost, you know, like this is sad. I do care about these people and these resources. And at the last moment, it was saved. So it felt like there was an impact and I didn't have to get a law passed or have the governor come down and do something. It was just like, okay, somebody here cares about this situation, about this community enough to kind of step in. All your reporting isn't just for nods. You're doing something with some impact. And I think that would probably be another kind of the great moments, but most of them are just the small ones.
Wow. I just want to say that really goes to show a lot about your character. You're very passionate about the community and what happens to people whose stories might not be as big or like as newsworthy. And that's really good. So
Yeah, no, I love it's you
that's
got to
really
be
inspirational.
to do this for the long run. I feel like you really need passion. I think that a lot of people kind of get to a certain point, and the passion kind of drains out of you. You know, a lot of these jobs are low paying and they're a lot of work. I'm telling you, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of trauma, a lot of mental health you have to take in, and I don't think that all the companies kind of respect that. But if you find the right place, there's definitely a lot of new places and startups who focus on you being okay, being good, making sure that you have enough money to afford your living situation so that you don't have an extra mental health cost because you're in debt or something. So that's coming along, but there's a lot of places, the big places that kind of will drain that, and you won't really have the passion to go out and do these stories over and over again. You'll want to do something else or something simpler or something that's not as traumatic. But kind of having that passion can be good and bad. You can be driving yourself kind of crazy to get these things done. And you know, someone still might try to cut your legs out underneath you or not want to publish your story. But you really got to have that want to get it published, to get it done the right way.
Okay. Throughout this talk, you have brought up mental health a lot. What are some ways that you think youth or even anybody can go about taking care of their mental health?
I mean, I think one of the things is kind of putting in focus, making sure you're thinking about this. Kind of, I think that as a youth, I faced a lot of things that I didn't really know were traumatizing to me. I was in a lot of all white spaces where, you know, my voice would be kind of shouted down or unheard. And my feelings probably weren't heard because of that either. So I think that there's a lot of kind of experiences that we have that we don't talk about, we kind of move on from. And it's really important to just kind of talk about them so that you can find like the community of people who kind of feel the same way. I feel like there's a lot of things that we all experience, but we don't talk about, and we kind of just keep it inside. Especially the males. Women are definitely a little bit more forthcoming with talking, but like men want to come off as seeming as the toughest person, the machoist man, and it's gonna hurt us. It will hurt us in the long run. It'll hurt our relationships. It'll hurt our careers. It'll hurt everyone around you. So kind of thinking about these moments and voicing them. You know, I think especially I'm a parent, so like thinking about how your parents' reaction to things you do might hurt you and how you might not say anything. you should say something. You should tell people about things that hurt you. And maybe sometimes we're wrong, you know, maybe people didn't have the worst idea, but it's still valid that we feel this way, and we should talk about it. So my big thing is definitely trying to talking and voicing when problems occur, finding communities that you can kind of talk and be open about the things that are happening. And then like we need to remove the stigma, because we're all suffering through a lot of mental health problems, from, you know, deaths in the family, COVID, financial debts, all of these things, all these factors kind of just, you know, bury us. You know, there's a reason why like, people are committing violence at young ages. It's because they need money. You know, money can kind of fix a lot of these problems, especially if you just need some food, you know, but then you become criminalized and all these other things. And it's a cycle you can't really get out of very easily. We're creating diversion programs, but like all of these things around mental health, we really need to kind of talk about and get a little bit more open about, so that you're not 30 when you first realize you have some issues you need to take care of.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So my final question is, what advice would you give to youth that is interested in entering this field of work?
Yeah, don't be discouraged. I think that that's the first thing. I think a lot of times I felt like I wasn't that good at what I was doing, but I always was able to get better and improve. And I think by the time I did, probably now I'm at a decade in this game, like, you know, I see people who were telling me that everything was wrong or that I wasn't doing things right, and they had no idea what they were doing, you know. They don't know the path to better their careers, or they don't know the path to better people's work. And I think that, you know, if we kind of not just focus on ourselves, but kind of not let people discourage us, you know, I think that there's a lot of different outlets, like the Tribe, built by themselves, you know, like small 2 Black women from Chicago building a news organization that's now getting some national recognition because it stays on point to what they wanted to do. They wanted to support the Black community. They figured out ways to do it. It's not an easy job. It's definitely a lot of work, but these are people who are dedicated to their profession, and no one can tell them they're doing it wrong because they're getting funding. They're providing a service that people want, and people will tell us that they don't need that service, or that people aren't gonna want this in the long run. But how are you gonna tell me that the Black community is not gonna want coverage of the Black community from a Black perspective? It's Chicago. We got millions of people here. Like, it's definitely something there, but people will definitely try to knock you off balance and tell you you're not as good as you think you are, or try to humble you because you're Black, because you're brown, because you're a woman, because you're LGBTQIA, any of the reasons. So like, just please do not listen. Like, if they're gonna have you fail, like, take the chance, fail. It's fine. Everyone fails. We fail all the time. I fail all the time. There's stories that I'll never finish writing that I've spent months and months on, but you know, you're still going to get another opportunity. There's going to be another chance. And if the first one isn't the right one, it's probably not the right choice. Like, there's another road, there's another path. Do not be discouraged. Keep pushing, and don't take unpaid internships.
Okay. All right. Well, Mr. McGhee, those are all the questions that I have for you. I just want to thank you again for hanging out with TrueStar. It has been amazing. All right. This is Lauryn Friar. It's been real.
Thank you guys for having me.